The room felt electric, the kind of charged silence that settles just before lightning splits the sky. Senators whispered in tight clusters. Staffers slid papers across polished desks, and the cameras, always watching, waited like hungry animals. At the center of it all sat Senator John Kennedy, hands folded, expression calm, though anyone paying attention could see the flicker of irritation tightening the corners of his eyes. He wasn't a man easily rattled, but today, something in the air pushed even his patience to its limits. Across from him, Frank Gehry didn't simply arrive. He unfolded into the room like a performance. Cloaked in artistic confidence, he presented a model draped in cloth, as if it were a sacred relic. With a dramatic flourish, he pulled the cover away, revealing a twisting, angular creation that made several people shift in their seats. No one could quite understand what they were looking at, only that it seemed to challenge logic itself. The whispers turned sharper. A few eyebrows rose. Phones lit up under the table as messages flew. "What is that?" Kennedy didn't move at first. He simply stared. A slow blink, a measured breath, and then the unmistakable tilt of his eyebrow, so slight, yet so devastating. The kind of reaction that told the whole room he was about to say something unforgettable. He leaned forward, fingers interlaced, and the entire audience leaned with him. Even Gehry paused, as if sensing something shift in the atmosphere, something far beyond architecture or artistic ego. Kennedy's voice cut through the silence like a clean blade, calm, steady, unmistakably sharp. And the moment he opened his mouth, the nation would remember it as the instant the room divided between fantasy and common sense. But no one in that room, least of all Frank Gehry, was prepared for what Kennedy said next long before the model appeared in that room. The project had already become a quiet storm across the country. Taxpayer dollars were on the line. Not a few, but millions. And people wanted to know why a monument meant for everyone suddenly looked like something built for no one. This wasn't a private art gallery or a billionaire's backyard installation. This was supposed to represent national identity, shared meaning, the kind of structure families would visit for generations. And yet, somehow, it had drifted into the hands of a man who seemed determined to bend it into a shape that defied every expectation except his own. The early leaks had already caused confusion. On social media, comments piled up. What even is this supposed to be? Why does it look like the building is melting? My tax dollars for this? Headlines hinted at growing frustration. A design no one asked for, another vanity project on the public dime. Gehry's vision or America's burden. Ordinary people felt pushed aside by a process that seemed to prioritize artistic ego over public purpose. They weren't attacking creativity. They were asking for clarity, dignity, and something that made sense. Inside the hearing, that tension seeped into the air. Staffers had seen the emails flooding their offices. Veterans groups, community leaders, immigrant families, all wanted reassurance that this monument would reflect them, not mock their experiences with an abstract maze of angles. When Gehry spoke of reinterpretation and challenging conventional form, it landed like a dismissal of every person who believed a national landmark should at least be recognizable as one. Kennedy felt that pressure too. Not the political kind, but the human kind, the weight of people who trusted him to speak plainly when others hid behind lofty language. To him, this wasn't about rejecting art. It was about defending the people who were being told they should appreciate something they didn't understand. It was about symbolism, responsibility, and the simple truth that public spaces belong to the public, not to the imagination of a single man. And as the unease in the room deepened, it became painfully clear. This fight was about far more than steel and concrete. Yet the deeper problem wasn't the design itself. It was the man behind it and the contradictions he carried into that room. Frank Gehry didn't rise in the architectural world by playing it safe. From the very beginning of his career, he embraced chaos, sharp angles, twisted metal, shapes that looked more like sculptures dropped from another dimension than buildings meant for human use. And for decades, critics and admirers fought over one question. Is Gehry a genius, or is he simply daring the world to say he went too far? His fame exploded after a museum design that sparked international headlines, not because of its beauty, but because of its outrage. The structure looked like a shipwreck mid-collision with a stack of crumpled steel sheets. Tourists loved it. Engineers hated it. The city council claimed it leaked so badly during the first storm that staff had to place trash bins all over the lobby to catch the dripping water. But Gehry, calm and unapologetic, brushed off the concerns with a smile. "Leaks are temporary," he once said. "Art is forever." That single sentence captured the essence of the man. Brilliant, fearless, and completely detached from practical reality. As his fame grew, so did the controversies. One university hired him to design a state-of-the-art academic center. What they received was a building so disorienting that first-time visitors got lost walking from the lobby to classrooms. The reflective stainless steel panels caused sunlight to beam directly into dorm windows across campus, heating rooms to dangerous temperatures. When frustrated students complained, Gehry reportedly shrugged and replied, "Sometimes people don't know what they want until you create it for them." The remark cemented his reputation, not as a villain, but as an elitist visionary, someone who saw the world as his canvas while the rest of society simply had to adjust around his imagination. In interviews, he spoke as though practicality was a burden, and critics were nothing more than people uncomfortable with progress. His supporters defended him as a genius. His detractors called him arrogant, disconnected, and dangerously unconcerned with the lives of the people who actually used his buildings. And perhaps that was the real problem. Gehry wasn't evil. He wasn't malicious. He was simply insulated. Living in a universe where creativity outweighed cost, where imagination overruled logic, and where public needs were little more than background noise behind his grand vision, but far from the world of titanium curves and billion-dollar budgets. Another figure was rising, someone who valued clarity over chaos, function over fantasy, and truth over theatrics. A man whose path was about to collide with Frank Gehry's in the most dramatic way imaginable. Long before Senator John Kennedy became a viral sensation for slicing through political nonsense with a single sentence, he was a small-town Louisiana kid who grew up believing that life didn't have to be complicated. His father taught him that a man's word mattered more than his wardrobe, and his mother taught him the value of humility. "Never talk over people," she'd say. "Talk to them." Those lessons stuck. They shaped him into the kind of man who could walk into a room full of experts and make everyone laugh, nod, and rethink everything they thought they knew. Kennedy built a career on what people now call folksy intelligence, a blend of charm, sarcasm, and razor-sharp logic delivered with the timing of a seasoned storyteller. Over the years, clips of him in Senate hearings became viral gold. In one now famous exchange, an agency official tried to bury the truth under a mountain of jargon. Kennedy leaned forward, tilted his head, and said, "Ma'am, I'm educated, but I ain't psychic." The room broke into laughter, and the official was forced to give a straight answer. Moments like that defined him. He wasn't trying to be clever. He was trying to be clear. Kennedy had little patience with theatrics, political, corporate, or artistic. He believed America didn't need performance. It needed honesty. Behind his humor was a deeper principle. People deserve the truth in plain English. No confusion. No glitter. No intellectual smoke and mirrors. And that's why ordinary Americans trusted him. He spoke the way they wished their leaders would, directly, confidently, and without apology. Over time, he became known as a defender of what he called plain-speaking America, the millions of people who work hard, pay taxes, raise families, and don't have time to decode overly complicated proposals or artistic statement about challenging societal frameworks. He understood their frustrations. He shared their values. And he carried those values into every committee room, every press briefing, every debate. To Kennedy, clarity wasn't just a communication style. It was a moral duty, a promise that he would never hide the truth behind fancy words or unnecessary spectacle. It's what set him apart, what earned him respect, and what made him the one man willing to stand against anything he believed was confusing the public instead of serving them. And those very values, humility, clarity, and plain common sense, were about to collide head-on with Frank Gehry's towering world of twisting steel and artistic extravagance. The room was tense, every whisper hanging in the air like static electricity. Gehry leaned back, a small, confident smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He began to defend his creation with the kind of language only an architect could love. Phrases like dynamic spatial interweaving and conceptual defiance of orthogonal constraints. The words floated over the room, impressive to some, incomprehensible to most. The press scribbled furiously. Staffers exchanged uneasy glances, and somewhere in the back, a young aide muttered under her breath, "What does that even mean?" Kennedy's calm demeanor didn't waver, but the irritation was visible now, a tightening of his jaw, a subtle shift in posture, a quiet intensity that made people lean in. He asked simple, piercing questions. How much is this going to cost taxpayers? What's the actual purpose of this structure? Is it safe for the public? Will it function as a building or only as an abstract statement? Each question cut through Gehry's elaborate phrasing like a knife, forcing him to pause, adjust, and find words that were at once vague and defensive. Gehry's tone grew condescending. "Senator, perhaps the concept is beyond conventional measures," he said, waving his hand as if the room were a gallery and Kennedy a puzzled visitor. "It's meant to challenge the way we perceive space itself." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Eyebrows rose. Cameras caught every subtle inflection, and reporters began filming with heightened intensity. Clips would hit social media in seconds, the tension already leaking into timelines across the country. Kennedy pressed harder, leaning forward, voice steady but sharp, cutting through Gehry's abstract defenses. "Challenging perception is fine, but this isn't a private gallery. This is public money. People deserve clarity, not confusion." Each syllable landed with precision, a steady counterpoint to Gehry's theatricality. The room grew quieter, the air taut, as if holding its breath for what would come next. Every staffer, senator, and journalist sensed the escalation. The clash wasn't just over a building. It was a battle between imagination untethered and accountability demanded. Lines sharpened. Voices tightened. Gehry spoke as if above criticism, a maestro in a concert only he could hear. Kennedy's questions persisted, unrelenting. Each one a measured strike that chipped away at the confidence Gehry carried so effortlessly. The world beyond the room was watching, even if only through the growing snippets being shared online. And then, when Gehry thought he had the upper hand, Kennedy delivered a line that changed everything. The room fell silent. Even the hum of air conditioning seemed to pause, leaving only the weight of anticipation hanging between the polished desks and towering pillars. Kennedy leaned forward slightly, his eyes scanning the angular model, then returned to Gehry with a calm intensity that demanded attention. For a moment, he said nothing, just measured breathing, the faint tapping of a pen, the kind of quiet that makes everyone lean in, unsure what will come next. Then came the line, dry, precise, devastating in its simplicity. "Frank," Kennedy began, his voice steady but cutting, "this is not architecture. It's a monument to confusion." Every syllable landed like a hammer strike. The words hung in the air, resonating against the walls, bouncing off cameras, and igniting the collective gasp of every person in the room. Senators froze mid-note. Staffers lowered their eyes, some covering their mouths in disbelief, while the press scrambled to capture the moment. Gehry, for the first time, seemed truly unsettled, a flicker of hesitation breaking his composed veneer. Kennedy didn't stop there. He followed with logic wrapped in calm reasoning, peeling apart Gehry's defenses layer by layer. "It's impractical for public use," he said, gesturing toward the model. "The pathways are confusing. Emergency access is unclear. Costs will skyrocket. What should inspire pride instead risks alienating the very people it's meant to honor." Each point was delivered without flourish, without need for theatrics, yet each one struck harder than any dramatic gesture could. The audience felt it. This wasn't a simple critique. It was a reckoning. The air vibrated with tension, a shared realization that Kennedy had shifted the balance. Where Gehry had relied on abstraction, elegance, and intimidation, Kennedy relied on clarity, reason, and truth. It was a kind of takedown that didn't need shouting to be unforgettable. Cameras clicked rapidly, flashes exploding like staccato fireworks. Microphones captured the stunned murmurs. The room itself seemed to tilt slightly, as if acknowledging that the scales had irrevocably shifted. Gehry's model, once the centerpiece of confident presentation, now felt like an elaborate question mark in the presence of Kennedy's piercing logic. And while the immediate silence spoke volumes, Kennedy knew the real reckoning wouldn't be confined to that room. He had made his point with precision, but the world beyond those walls was already waiting. But the real explosion didn't happen in that room. It happened online, That'd be why the time Kennedy left the hearing room, the world had already caught fire. Clips of his monument to confusion line were everywhere. TikTok edits looped the moment with dramatic sound effects. Memes transformed the angular model into everything from tangled spaghetti to a spaceship lost in space, and YouTube reaction videos racked up hundreds of thousands of views within hours. Architects and critics took to online forums and op-eds, dissecting every angle of the model and every word of Kennedy's response. Some praised Gehry's daring imagination, framing him as a misunderstood genius pushing boundaries. Others sided firmly with Kennedy, calling the design impractical, arrogant, and tone-deaf to the public it was meant to serve. Late-night comedians seized the moment, delivering punchlines that spread like wildfire across social media, blending humor with pointed social commentary. Clips of Kennedy's calm, cutting delivery were replayed alongside animated GIFs of the model's impossible angles, cementing the confrontation as an instant cultural touchstone. The debate spilled into living rooms, classrooms, and coffee shops. People argued over cost, functionality, and artistic vision. But beyond the details, the moment crystallized a broader clash. Common sense versus elitism, practicality versus art for art's sake eccentricity, the voice of everyday Americans against a worldview detached from their experience. Supporters of Kennedy flooded comment sections with praise for his courage and clarity, celebrating a man willing to hold a powerful figure accountable while remaining composed, witty, and grounded. Even those who defended Gehry admitted, in hushed tones, that they had never seen someone dismantle abstraction with such precise logic. Every social media echo carried the same energy, a showdown that transcended architecture, a battle symbolic of larger tensions in society. Kennedy became a hero of a story that people told to friends, shared on feeds, and debated passionately in threads. Gehry's work remained as it always had, provocative, audacious, and admired by some, but now it existed in the shadow of a moment that reminded the public that imagination alone is never enough. And as the reactions multiplied, as tweets and memes ricocheted around the globe, one thought lingered in the collective consciousness, unanswered and heavy. But as the dust settled, one question remained: what did this moment really mean? When the frenzy finally quieted, what remained was more than just a debate over steel and curves. It was a lesson in leadership, responsibility, and the quiet power of clarity. Kennedy's words had cut through layers of abstraction not to belittle creativity, but to remind everyone that imagination, however dazzling, must exist in service of the people it affects. A building or a policy or a proposal is only meaningful if it communicates, functions, and honors those who invest their trust, time, and resources into it. Art, innovation, and genius have their place. Of course, Gehry's vision reminded the world that pushing boundaries is essential to progress. Yet, Kennedy showed that progress untethered from practicality risks alienating the very people it is meant to inspire. Leaders must balance the brilliance of creation with the weight of accountability. The tension between daring ideas and the common good is where true leadership is forged, and Kennedy had navigated it with a mixture of humor, patience, and moral precision that left a lasting impression on every observer. More than that, the confrontation reaffirmed a timeless truth. Public servants exist not for prestige, applause, or personal acclaim. They exist for the citizens they serve. Kennedy's calm dissection of Gehry's elaborate design was not a rejection of art itself, but a defense of the people who would live alongside it, who would fund it, and who would carry its legacy. It was an act of clarity, integrity, and plain-speaking courage, values that resonate far beyond the walls of a single hearing room. And in that contrast between Kennedy's steady honesty and Gehry's lofty abstraction, the audience glimpsed something universal: the power of simplicity, the dignity and accountability, and the importance of respect, both for one's work and for those who bear its consequences. When a nation watches a moment unfold with the intensity of laughter, outrage, and awe, it is not just entertainment. It is a reaffirmation of the principles that bind a society together. And as people reflected, debated, and shared their own reactions, one thing became clear. In a world full of spectacle, confusion, and noise, truth delivered with composure shines brighter than the grandest display of genius. And in an era of noise, the world needed this reminder. John Kennedy didn't attack Frank Gehry's design out of malice or to make a spectacle. He did it out of responsibility. He saw confusion where clarity should have reigned, impracticality where practicality was needed, and arrogance where accountability should have stood. His words reminded everyone watching that leadership is not about placating genius or deferring complexity. It's about serving the people, speaking plainly, and defending the common good even when it means challenging the powerful. As the clip spread, millions of viewers felt a sense of validation. Kennedy's stand wasn't just about architecture. It was about values, about seeing someone act with integrity, about having the courage to speak truth in the face of dazzling abstraction. It was a moment that invited reflection. How often do we let spectacle overshadow substance? How often do we accept confusion when clarity is possible? In Kennedy's calm, incisive critique, there was a lesson for anyone seeking guidance, inspiration, or affirmation that courage and simplicity matter. If this moment resonated with you, now is the time to join the conversation. Subscribe to follow stories where truth meets accountability. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what clarity, honesty, and leadership mean to you. Share this video with friends, family, and colleagues who value insight over illusion. Be part of a community that celebrates those willing to hold power to account, who honor integrity above showmanship. In the end, Kennedy's confrontation with Gehry is more than a headline or viral clip. It is a reminder that courage doesn't always roar, that truth doesn't always need applause, and that ordinary people deserve leaders who choose clarity over chaos. Moments like these inspire us to expect better, speak up, and carry the same principles into our own lives. Because in a world full of noise, those who stand for simplicity, honesty, and accountability are the ones who truly leave a mark.